Let's now talk about how to make your strategic college shortlist. I sometimes, get a student who comes to me and says, I want to go to MIT. I only want to go to MIT. And when I ask, what are your grades? They'll be like, oh, I got 5 A's, I got 2 A stars, I got 2 B's, and I have a C. You don't have a chance. You have to be very realistic in terms of even what you are targeting for which schools you are applying to. And the information on how you're fitting against them academically are all available for free on Google. And I will just get to it on how you should be making your strategic college list. First, please go to the website you see in front of you. This is just one option. As I mentioned, there are other organizations which also rank universities globally, and check out what is the ranking in your program. So if it is arts, you should be looking at that. If it is engineering, you should be looking at that. Don't look at overall rankings, but look at program specific rankings. Number 2, you can filter the huge list which will come up with hundreds of universities in the area you're interested in. Let's say you are doing this for artificial intelligence. Filter it. See what are the Asian and European universities which are highly ranked in AI, and you can remember where you can go up to. You can go up to 300, 400, depending on, do you have the caliber to get into NUST, or are you looking at FC College, in which case your threshold is 8,000 something, right? So there are 2 things you should do when you are shortlisting your Asian and European universities. Number 1, you want to look at the language requirements. You want to make sure that that subject, that particular course is being taught in English. Sometimes, let's take Korea for instance. Korea has very, very good universities, particularly when you're looking at computer science and technology. It's really at the cutting edge of this, far better than UK and many of the US universities. But what do you need to keep in mind? Within the same university, you may have some courses being taught in Korean and other courses being taught in English. So unless you plan to study in the native language, please make sure you go to the website and check which language is this program, Artificial Intelligence, being conducted in. Then you want to look at the tuition cost and scholarship policy for internationals. Depending on the country you are looking at, you may sometimes find that the tuition cost, even if you're not eligible for a scholarship, let's say your grades are not that great, would still be significantly low. Whether it is Malaysia, whether it is Turkey, many of whom have universities much higher ranked than ours, it is cheaper for you to go and study there than to pay the tuition cost at LUMS, for example. Then, for internationals, when you're looking at US colleges, let's say you want to go to the US, that is it, you've decided, even though, recall our advice, it's best to have a global perspective. For US colleges, if you are looking for financial aid, you want to make sure you're looking at just private universities and not state universities. It is very rare for public state universities, who by the way are very well ranked, to give full rides, which basically means scholarship as well as your tuition and living to internationals. So you really want to eyeball private universities. A good website is niche.com, and you can once again filter results by your area of academic passion. So you can filter it by economics, you can filter it by business, you can filter it by finance, and see what the results are coming up. Then you take that list, and once again I said you have to be realistic in how you are making your reach, target, and likely school list. You should look at the SAT scores and the acceptance rates. And prepscholar.com, it's a website which will give you detailed information for each and every university you're thinking about, whether it is Duke, whether it is Vanderbilt, whether it is Emory. You will find not only the SAT averages, you will also be looking at, they'll give you the percentile range for the 25th percentile for SAT, the 75th percentile for SAT. They will give you the acceptance rates. They will give you the average GPA. By the way, you should convert your O and A level grades into a GPA so you know where you stand compared to others who are applying, and also factor that in as well. And while we're on the topic of SAT percentages, most students in Pakistan tend to look at the average SAT scores when they are looking at how to make their list. And I am here to tell you that the average is not the number you should be looking at as an international. You should be looking at the 75th percentile. Why? Because we have studies by US University themselves. This, I'm referring to a Princeton University study right in front of you, that Asians have a tax on them. It's sad, but it's true. Students who are Asians on average must score 140 points higher on the SAT than if you are a white American. There are other studies which basically verify this data, and I've put that for you to look at as well. So what should you be looking at? You should be looking at the 75th percentile number, not the 50th. If you are not reaching the 75th percentile, if you are somewhere around the 25th, go SAT optional, while that is still an option for you to will, which it currently is. Additional considerations when you are making the decision of whether I should study abroad or not. We've spoken about financial factors, a key element of that decision. We've spoken about global rankings and local rankings, and how that should factor into your decision. Moreover, there are, depending on your background, depending on your future plans, there are other things to keep into consideration. If you're planning to do medicine, for instance, for the vast majority of students, I would actually say, please do your MBBS from Pakistan, because it is a much cheaper consideration. Moreover, it is 5 years. If you look at the US, for instance, and I get students who come and say, oh, I want to do my medicine in the US, keep in mind you will have to do 4 years of an undergraduate program. You can call it pre-med, but frankly, you can study a language. You can take French as your major and then go to med school. So there's 4 years of undergrad and then there's 4 years of med school. 8 years compared to the 5 over here. And then when you factor in all the expenses you would incur, it's kind of a no-brainer. Medicine is best studied in Pakistan. Other considerations. What are your long-term plans? If you plan to just stay in Pakistan, perhaps not going overseas might be beneficial to you. It depends which sector you wish to work in. When you come back from overseas, a key consideration that I've heard here in the job market, the way it's looked at is as follows. Number one, did you go to a brand name university? Oxford, Cambridge, King's, Harvard, MIT, Princeton, Yale, the brand names. Or did you go to get a degree from the US or the UK? Okay. Or the third category, did you get a foreign degree? This is unfortunate because many of the multinational firms here and local firms here especially may not be looking at the strength of the program. So if you are considering a long-term future in Pakistan, that's something you need to factor in depending on which level of university you can get admission in. The other thing to take into consideration is the cultural context. I also get a lot of queries from parents of girls. We don't want to send our daughter to the West. And so to them, I say there are now a lot of Muslim countries with very safe environment for women. Turkey is one such. I've personally been there. I can attest to it. A completely safe environment for a Muslim young lady to study. So those are additional considerations that would play into your decision of whether you should study abroad or not. And with that, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you can now go ahead and make your own strategic college list and figure out whether studying abroad is best for you or not.